You're listening to Cinema Rex. It's an Iranian film podcast. Episode 5, Ali Abbasi's Holy Spider. I have a question for you, Farhan.
Yes.
Do you know any graduates of the Toronto Metro University gold medalists for highest academic achievement and extraordinary community contributions? Do you know any of them?
I do. I do.
You do?
I do. Her name is Sadaf Khajeh.
Wow. Then you know what? We should have her on as a guest.
I'm down.
I think we should just have her on.
Let's just call her right now.
Let's call her right now. Beep, boop, boop, beep, boop, boop, boop. Durud bar shoma dostan aziz. This is the Cinema Rex podcast, where we discuss all things Iranian films. I'm Kaveh Mohebi.
And I'm Farhan Moradi.
Before I let her say anything, I just want to introduce her formally by saying Sadaf Khajeh is a Toronto-based artist with a background in visual design, film, and photography. She holds a master's degree in documentary media from Toronto Metropolitan University. Her short film, titled Distance, has been officially selected and screened at the Art Gallery of Hamilton's Photophobia Contemporary Moving Image Festival, Trinity Square Video and V-Tapes Video Fever 2021, Cinefam Film Festival 2021, and Pleasure Dome's Domestic Documents, Spaces of Care and Crisis. She's currently a board member at Pleasure Dome. She's also a practicing impact producer and also working at CBC Sports as an associate business manager for the Paris 2024 Olympic Games, which is a very impressive resume because my bio is like, I write, and then it ends there. But Sadaf, welcome to Cinema Rex podcast.
Hello. Hi.
It's very nice to see you, but see you again. And thank you for joining us. How are you today?
Good. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
Thank you for joining us.
We're going to have such a good conversation.
Well, I mean, we'll do a deep dive into it overall. But I mean, to talk about really important stuff, what's your favorite Iranian dish of all time?
Korma sabzi.
Hey, me too.
Always.
You guys are so basic.
So what's your favorite dish, Farhan?
So there's one called Shami Abdar, which is like, it's really good. It's a khoresh, basically. But imagine like Persian meatballs. Well, it's not even Persian. It's mazandarani. So imagine Iranian meatballs. I'll make you some.
Sadaf,
Yeah.
can you tell me a little bit about what it means to be an impact producer? And you make it's like almost like experimental documentary films?
All right. So impact producing doesn't really have to do with making documentaries. It's after a documentary film is made. Mm-hmm. And it has a potential to make a difference. So it is about a certain social issue, social justice issue. You take that documentary and you actually use it. You partner up with organizations that are working towards solving that issue. You partner up with them. You take the documentary to audiences that watch it that have the potential to actually make a difference and make a change. So you create sort of like an impact campaign. You find partners, partner up, set up screenings, community screenings, and it goes from there.
I mean, so it sounds like an incredibly rewarding job, but
It is.
it also feels like at times it's very bureaucratic and you end up dealing with like a lot of obstacles that are, I don't know, either frustrating or patronizing or just not like it's that you're dealing with that like blend of community service and activism, but mixed with filmmaking and art.
Yes.
Which is often a very frustrating blend.
Yes.
Because it's really hard to juggle all of those.
Yes. And I worked on a documentary film called The Secret Society. And it's about egg donation and infertility, all the stigmas around it in Canada. Mm-hmm. It's very complicated. It's very complex. And you just have to be very careful what you're advocating for, especially in those realms. The process of egg donation is, it's a long one and it's painful and it takes time. And it's sort of not fair that egg donors just get reimbursed and not compensated for their time and their labor. And that's like an issue. And then we have this whole concept of infertility and how, there's not really enough space for people who are going through infertility, for couples who are going through infertility to sort of have support, emotional, mental support. So the documentary sort of covers and shows all of that. But you have to be very careful with like what your impact campaign goals are, and because compensating for egg donation in Canada is criminalized. So
Whoa.
there's I highly recommend watching the film.
Cool.
The documentary, The Secret Society.
Can you tell us a little bit about what your short film Distance is about?
So Distance, I made it during the pandemic, and it was a film I made with my friend in Iran, Dorsa. Basically, it was just us filming ourselves and our everyday lives, but it became so much more than that. It was very interesting. The process of making the film made us want to unrealistically be together physically. So Dorsa sent me a voice note one morning saying she had a dream that Canada was the floor upstairs. And I came down from Canada to her studio and told her what to film of her studio. And I thought that's so... we kept that in the documentary, and sort of became this like, I don't know, longing for us wanting to be together in the same space through the pandemic and going, but being sort of isolated in our own four walls. It was a good experience.
That's a really interesting concept to actually make a short film.
Yeah.
Like you and Dorsa could actually do something like that, where you could have a short film about these two coworkers working together from like different sides of the world. And like every once in a while, one will like pop their head down, and you just cut to a wide shot.
Yeah.
And someone like pops their head into the other frame and then pops back out. And she could film all the Iranian stuff in Iran, and you could film all the Canadian stuff here, and then cut it together.
Oh, that would be cool. That would be a cool sort of surreal fiction.
I'll take 10%.
Okay.
10% of the wide gross that is the world of short experimental film.
Yeah.
You'll be a billionaire in no time.
Yes.
It also reminds me of like, Un Chien de Loup. It's like the experimental short film that's
Surrealism.
Louis Buñuel and Salvador Dali. And it was just like, we'll take our dreams, whatever we dream about, we film. And I think their one rule was like, we don't focus on any of it having to make sense. We just want we'll capture the stuff that we're imagining and stuff. And so it's a crazy film.
It is. Yeah, he made an animation with Disney. Have you seen that one? It's on Disney Plus.
I haven't seen it yet. Is it on Disney Plus now?
Maybe.
Yeah.
What's it called?
It's like a woman falling in love with time. Is it about that? Something like that.
I don't know.
The film was called Destino.
Destino. Is that? Am I right with like
The concept?
the story of it being a woman?
I haven't
the
seen
love
it.
story between a woman and time.
I haven't seen it, so I'm gonna have to watch it like this week. I didn't realize it was on Disney Plus, so I thought it'd be hard to find.
You know what wasn't on Disney Plus?
What?
The movie that we're watching today. And
Are we watching it? Did we watch a movie today?
well, I watched it today. You guys watched it a long time ago.
So where did you find the movie today?
I got it on YouTube Movies. So I bought a digital copy.
For legal purposes, I'll say I did the same thing too. Okay, we'll just dive right into Holy Spider because I feel like we're all loosened up now and fresh and we've stretched. With your permission, I will dive into a quick plot summary.
You don't have my permission.
You have mine.
Female journalist Arzu Rahimi travels to the Iranian holy city of Mashhad to investigate a serial killer targeting sex workers. As she descends into the dark underbelly of the holy city and draws closer to exposing his crimes, the opportunity for justice grows harder to attain when the murderer is embraced by many as a hero and believe he's cleansing the streets of sinners. Based on the true story of the Spider Killer, who saw himself as on a mission from God as he killed 16 women between 2000 and 2001. It has a Rotten Tomato score of 83% and an audience score of 76%.
You lived in Tehran in 2001 when these murders occurred. What do you remember?
Well, I remember that I was living a very different reality. I was living in my own little bubble, you know. I come from like a well-off family. I was living in a really nice apartment. I was playing tennis 3 times a week. I was going out eating in restaurants. So I was very like protected in my own bubble. And then this happened, and then there's sort of like, it was really a slap in the face.
The bubble burst.
The bubble burst big time. And I think when the bubble really burst for me was when he was caught, and they started referring, or some people, some newspapers, some journalists, some authorities started referring to him as someone who did his religious duty and as a hero. And then, I was like, okay, maybe I shouldn't go play tennis so much. Maybe I should pay more attention to what's going on here. And I've been thinking about this ever since. I've been actively thinking about this for the past 20 years.
And with that, Sadaf, I go to you first. What did you think of Holy Spider?
Okay, so I would say I hadn't watched it, and I just heard from my friends. They were like, oh, don't watch it with your family. It's like, just there's so much violence. And so I already had this like idea of like, oh, I'm not going to like this film. I'm going to see some like scenes I'm not going to like. So I went into it just with that sort of mindset, but I was surprised. I liked it.
Can I ask you a quick, do you normally like this genre of film, like neo-noir thrillers and like stuff that, like, I'm sure we're going to bring up Fincher over and over again in this podcast, but like, are you drawn into those type of movies like Seven and stuff, or do you usually shy away from them?
I used to be drawn. I used to watch Dexter.
Right, yeah.
I used to be drawn, not so much anymore. I don't know, especially after like the things that have happened the past year. I feel like we are becoming too numb towards these like violent stories. I don't know. I used to be, but not so much anymore. But you know,
Farhan, what did you think of the film?
I have mixed feelings about it. I think that there was a lot that was very well done with the film, especially technically. I think the cinematography was great. The acting was great. The music was really good. I do think that some of the violence and the sexual violence in the movie was a little gratuitous. And I feel like there was maybe a little too much runtime of the film dedicated to it. I think something that I was actually expecting, I expected the film to build tension way more than it actually did. Because typically when you watch movies like this, the thing that's gripping to me is often when there's building of tension, right? Like not the actual thing happening, but the anticipation of like, oh, something's off, something's not right, all this stuff. And so for that, I think the opening of the movie had a little bit of that. But that's also only because I kind of knew what the movie was about. If you don't know what the movie's about, I don't think that opening sequence does a good job of building that tension initially. I think once she's like going into the guy's house and she feels like this guy's really weird, then it does. But then even then I think it stays on things too long. I think it lingers on the violence too much because it doesn't do well at building the tension. I think it tries to use that violence to make the movie more provocative than it actually was. So for that, I was a little disappointed. But overall, I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. But we can get more into it as we get further into the review.
And like, I just wanted to ask Farhan, where did you want to see more of the tension? Like more tension? Where did you want to see it?
Like even just POV of her walking around in the city, of the main character, of Arzu walking around in the city, I think is a good way to do it. Or the anticipation around, for example, the victims, right? Like maybe we follow the victims and they're on the city, or there's murmurs about, oh, you hear like he has a motorcycle, and then you like hear motorcycles go by. Like there's a scene in the movie where that one motorcycle is following Arzu, which I think does a good job of it. But the other side of it too is I think because Arzu's character is so strong, I personally didn't feel like she was in very much danger until the guy actually picks her up. And even then I was like, she's in control to a degree, right? Obviously she is in danger, but if there's like a gradient of she's in complete danger on the one side and she's completely safe on the other, I felt like she was sort of in the middle, but erring on the side of she has control. But that's just how I felt. And so I don't know if that was intentional. I would have loved to have seen a little more attention there. Also, by no means am I saying I could have done a better job at this, like, because we're also filmmakers, right? I understand that these are challenging things. I'm just saying this is how I felt.
Can I draw a really interesting opening thought I had about this film that I just want your thoughts on? Because, and Sadaf, I say this every time with every podcast, I am such an opening shots, first things we see nerd. Like, I am so focused on what is the first thing we see in a film. Mm-hmm. I'm obsessed with it. I dissect it so much because I think it's so important, the first thing you see in a film. So the very first thing you see is a quote from
Nahj al-Balagha, yeah.
Thank you from saving me from saying it in a bad way. So yeah, it's like a collection of Islamic sermons and letters. And the quote is, "Every man shall meet what he wishes to avoid." So that's like the very first thing you're seeing. And we could dissect that too. Within 2-3 minutes later on, you're seeing a naked woman, bruised and beaten, 9/11 footage in the background, because 9/11 was happening, I guess, that night. If you remember the news footage in the background, with the first John she goes to, it's like 9/11 towers going on. And an unsimulated blowjob scene. Now, I'm sure it was a prosthetic penis, but there's like literally you get a shot of her performing oral sex on a man, and it's like showing the penis. Farhan, you're looking like you missed that part of the movie.
No, I saw it. I actually made a note that I thought some of the stuff in the opening scene was a little gratuitous as well.
So, but I mean, and yes, I agree. But why that combination of opening shots and images? An Islamic quote, 9/11, a bruised and beaten nude woman, and an unsimulated blowjob scene. And I don't think it's gratuitous in the sense there's like, it was really not, it doesn't feel like the kind of film that needed those things, but it's such an overt choice by the director to be like, these are the first things I want you to take away. Because he doesn't come back to the There's like future sex scenes in the film that aren't as graphic as that.
I think he was trying to be provocative.
That's what I was thinking, to provoke.
Like, that's what I took from it.
Yeah, exactly. But like, why the necessity? Like, don't you think from a filmmaker's perspective, the subject matter in and of itself would be, it like almost is on a hat. I'm going to come to this term again, but it's going to be a hat on a hat, where it's almost like the subject matter is already disturbing enough.
Yeah.
You don't need 9/11 there, which has nothing to fucking do with Iran anyways.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I mean,
although I will say the 9/11 thing, part of it was, I think, to immediately tell the audience when this takes place. I think another side of it is to also show what atrocities people will commit in the name of their belief. I think that's the message that the filmmaker is trying to get across. Right.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think in an attempt to really demonstrate that this film is different from other Iranian cinema, the filmmaker goes to extreme lengths in like 5 different areas immediately to tell the audience, oh yeah, this movie's going to be edgy. This is not like any other Iranian movie you've seen before.
Yeah.
And like, I get it. And I guess there's something to be said about that. I feel like it was unnecessary, and I would have preferred a slower burn there that slowly sets up the world we're in, the rules of engagement, the themes of the film. Whereas just like throwing it at you with like 3 shots, I thought was a little cheap.
Can I like make a comment? I feel, and I've seen it in other films too, that sometimes it's more personal for the directors. I don't know if you've seen Layla's Brothers. I feel like some of the themes in that film were like, they got personal. Like, I feel like he had the choice of making the film in Iran, I think, at the Abbasi. But then eventually they decided to not make it in Iran because of all the limitations. And, you know, there's that aspect of, yes, he's making a film for an audience, but also he is making the film. Where did he grow up? What were the limitations? What does he want to say with his film? I don't know. Having grown up in Iran and having grown up in that environment, I feel like there's a part of us that we want to provoke, that we want to be like, you know what? I have this space where I can say what I want to say, and I'll say it even more loudly.
Yeah. But okay, do you know much more about that? Because I read that as well, that he had the opportunity to shoot this film in Iran. It would not have been even it would not be the same film if he shot in Iran.
No.
He couldn't have done a fraction of the stuff he does. And I'm very surprised that he even had that as an option. It's almost like, it doesn't even sound like a choice to me, because it's not he would have had to sacrifice so much of what the film is.
Yeah.
So
Actually,
do you know exactly what that story is, or do you?
no,
not
I
know?
just read that somewhere, but
Yeah, I saw it too.
funny
I just
enough,
wasn't
there
sure
was
about
like we were talking about that other film, Ankabut, like Killer Spider, that was actually made in Iran, and it it was censored. It like the director still is kind of bitter about how his film was. I think they didn't allow him to be in the Faj Film Festival. His film to be in the Faj Film Festival. Like he had a lot of. There was a lot of like holding him back and holding the film back. So he went through a lot. So like, yeah, that would have been what Ali Abbasi might have experienced had he made his film in Iran.
the director of Killer Spider might also be having all this contempt because his is the less famous film now. The other one went on to Cannes, went to TIFF, which is where I saw it opening night at TIFF. So like his, Abbasi's film gets all the acclaim and world recognition. Like this, I didn't hear about this film until I started the other film until I started doing research for this one, and it's like a footnote on the Wikipedia page that there's another film. I'm like, oh, so it is. Yeah, I can see. I want to see. Have you seen the other film?
I wanted to see it before this podcast, but
Me
I
too.
didn't have time.
We'll have to do that at some point. Yeah. We'll do a sequel episode to this podcast. I also say, Faran, to the thing you're saying, I totally agree with you, and I don't think we've ever been in as much lockstep because I feel like I think Abbasi is a good director. He's a very talented director. I think
the directing is great. Like, don't get me wrong. I think the
I think
the blocking is wonderful. I think that the performances from all the actors are really great. The way that sound design and music is married into the scenes is really great.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But the stuff about the tension, which is pivotal, and it's all in the director's hands. It's something that you see when Fincher does so well. You are at the edge of your seat with tension. When he does Zodiac and Jake Gyllenhaal's in the basement and the killer might be upstairs, you are so full of dread. In like Seven, or that the Mindhunter, where this is like, I feel like those moments that you felt lacked a bit of tension, which I agree. It's almost like that's the difference between Abbasi, who's a great director, and Fincher, who I personally believe is a master director. Like he is. I think he's one of the. If he's a peerless director doing the thriller genre. I don't think there's anyone who does thriller as well as Fincher does. So it's like those little moments, because Arzu does have these moments where she's like investigating the crime, but there isn't this much of. I didn't feel that tension until she's in the room with him. It's the first time I'm like, okay, now it's like,
yeah.
Now I'm like genuinely worried for her. But throughout the film,
I would say I have a different point of view.
Yes, please go.
I don't know, from the very beginning, just even sitting with Sharifi in front of the judge, I felt the tension for her.
Oh yeah, 100% there, big time.
Oh yeah, there I felt it too.
Yeah, but like even her being in the street, her being in her hotel room alone with the officer,
I felt it.
Like
there
I
too.
felt it. Yeah.
I guess, but I 100% agree with you. I feel like those were like moments that punctuated. Like there were significant moments that punctuate, like the judge and alone with the officer, but the interaction with the interplay with the overall murderer, it just seems so divorced from one another. We're spending all this time getting to know the murderer alone, and we get to see his family life and stuff. And I don't think it was from lack of like skill, perhaps, as much as maybe just we see so much of who this guy is, and he's so reduced to like this shitty family. There was just something about, there wasn't the unknown specter of who the serial killer was.
I don't know if that's necessarily like on the director. I think that part of that, and the director is also one of the writers on the film, I think that part of that is about the writing. I think that there weren't enough moments written in that could be built out with more tension, right? Like, for example, imagine if we just get moments where she's alone and she's like hearing something, or she sees something, or she hears in a distance like someone screaming, and she's like, is that what that is? Like, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like building a bit of that intrigue and that mystery, I think, and hearing things and not quite seeing things. I think writing those moments into a script gives a director an opportunity to flex that more. Because whenever she's in danger, I think that the director does a really good job at showing and building that tension. my issue is that there aren't enough moments of ambiguity, whereas Fincher's films have tons of that. There's tons of scenes of ambiguity, right? Or like a movie like Nocturnal Animals, which I think is the most tense film I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that film has tons of that, right? Like tons of scenes where there's like very little dialogue, or it's stripped down dialogue, or some of the scenes in No Country for Old Men. Like that scene with Chigurh at the counter with the guy at the gas station is tense. And it's not tense because you're like, oh, he's gonna kill him. It's tense because you're like, I have no idea what his intention is here. Like this, like that ambiguity is, I think, what lends to that tension. Or a movie like Jaws, which is like this massive blockbuster movie, works as well as it does because the animatronic shark looked terrible, so they had to show less of it. So again, that ambiguity lends to the tension of the film, and I think that I think is the crux of why it was missing some of that tension for me. There's definitely moments of it, which is why I think it shows that the director clearly has talent. But yeah.
And I also have a question for you, Sadaf, about this, because correct me if you feel like I'm wrong or misplaced in this thinking. There's something about Arzu's character. Those moments with the men around her, especially like the hotel clerk early on, which is like the first sign of it, right? He was like, "Oh, we don't have a room for you," and then she's a journalist, and then when she goes, "Oh, suddenly you have a room," and he's like, fix your hijab, like your hair is like, that's the last resort he can go to, is like your hair is showing. But she's performing this like a woman who is very capable of dealing with these men because she's had to deal with it her entire life. So it's like, in a lot of ways, it's not even the judge. It's like she's Zebel. She knows how to like handle these asshole men. So it wasn't so much of like, I wasn't feeling tension, even though I hated those moments because I hate those guys. I wasn't tension as much as like, ugh, here we go again. Like, here's another one of these. I mean, bleeping. Well, I'll beep that out. One of these effing bad, I'm trying not to swear, who is just standing in her way of doing the right thing, right?
Yeah.
And because I like that about her character. She knows how to handle them really well.
She does. Yeah. No, I agree. I was just thinking about myself.
Yeah, of course.
And how I probably wouldn't have been as brave as her. Or maybe I would have. It's tough. Like, being there, because I lived in Iran from 2014 to 2018. There are times where you're just, you become brave. I don't know. And then there are times that you feel like there's danger and I need to just like cover my head, hold my head down. But then there are times where you're like, no, I need to stand up for myself.
Yeah.
I have like, memories and experiences of like men following me in the street, at a very young age, and then later on in my 20s, and my reaction was very different. When I was younger, I would just like run, but then I got older and I was like yelling at the dude, like, "What are you doing? Why are you following me? Get out!" And like,
Yeah.
So yeah, I get her. But like, okay, now that you bring that up, there's a scene where she's talking to her mom.
Yeah, on the phone.
And she's saying, "Oh yeah, but first of all, that conversation is very real. I love that." But she's saying, "Yeah, I'm taking care of myself. Don't worry." And then she's putting on this lipstick and like this makeup to go and be a bait. That didn't, for me, like, I don't know. For me, that was like, I was like, what is she doing? Is she really gonna become a bait? Like. That was a bit.
And she looks so confident when she's doing it. And so because she's so confident doing all these things, I was hesitant to be like, "Oh no," because I was like, "Oh, she's got this, right?" And then when she's in the moment, you're like, "Oh no," you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think part of you feeling that tension in some of these scenes where like we might not have felt as tense, do you think that's because the film is building up that tension, or do you think it's because you're able to draw parallels with some of your own experiences?
I think I'm able to draw parallels with my experiences, maybe. I don't know, because you're not feeling it in the film.
Sometimes I was. Like in some of the ones that you mentioned, I was, and then in some of the ones you mentioned, I wasn't. Like the one in the hotel, I didn't. Like when she's talking to the guys at the front desk. At first, I was like, oh, and then immediately she's like, she takes charge of that situation. I'm like, oh no, she's good. She's got this, right? Like I took that as, oh, this is a scene that's supposed to demonstrate to the audience that she is in command and she's confident and she's a strong person. But then the later scene that she has with the officer, that I was feeling the tension like the second he was in the room with her.
No, that was a very tense scene. And it just reminded me of all these like Me Too, because, you know, there's a Me Too movement in Iran too, and all these stories that come out reminded me of like all those stories that I read. Like, yeah, once the women are in these four walls with the men, that's it. Like, even if she screams, no one's going to hear her, which I think later on in the scene where she is with the killer, she goes to the window and she screams.
Just to jump to that moment, actually, just to add to that moment, and then I'll go back to the officer scene. I really liked that moment when she's screaming, because that was the thing that was stopped. Like the serial killer isn't intimidated by the knife. The knife won't stop him, but the screaming of the help, he's like, please lower your voice. For the love of God, I'll do anything you say. Stop screaming. And there was something very, the subtext of that scene was almost like the woman's voice is a bigger threat to him than the woman's weapon in her hand. You know, like when she had the knife, it didn't stop him at all. He's like, you're going to pull a knife on me? What do you think you're doing? But the second she starts raising her voice, he's like cowering. He's like, I'll do anything. She's like, go in the bathroom and lock the door behind you. He's like, yes, I'll do anything you say, which I thought was a really interesting subtextual moment. But I will say, the thing about the police officer, it also really bothered me because there's something more that bothered me more about the police officer scene than even all the serial killer scenes. Because it's like the serial killer is being a serial killer.
Yeah.
But the police officer is supposed to be this, like, I mean, I know they aren't, even in this country or Iran or whatever. But this idea of like they hide behind the badge of authority, of like protection and authority. And yet they're revealing their true colors behind closed doors. It's like, it makes my skin crawl in a different way than the serial killer does.
Yeah.
It's like I'm almost more upset about that.
And again, for me, it's the ambiguity in that scene again. Because it's like, what's he getting at? What's he trying to do? What's he going to do? He can get away with a lot. Like, this is a very compromising situation. Like, that's why the tension was building for me again.
One of the most tense parts for me was when it was the motorcycle guy following her that wasn't the serial killer. Do you remember when she's walking alone at night? And it's just sort of like it's a misdirect because it's just a guy on a bike. Maybe he was following her too, but it wasn't the serial killer. Yeah. And that's, again, like what you're saying, is the ambiguity of who is this him? Is this the moment it's going to happen?
I want
and that
more
was
of
more
that.
tense than a lot of the... Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I want more of that.
There's rumors of her flirting with her previous editor, and it got her fired because they were saying that she was flirting and whatever. She's a tease. And then she gets upset at her friend her colleague for even like bringing it up, because she's like, the truth is he's sexually harassing and sexually assaulting me. My boss is taking advantage. What do you think was the purpose of that? Because I feel like it's just another layer of the gross patriarchal bullshit that's going on. But why do you think it was important for the writers to put that into the script? Because it really like stuck out to me as like, that's an interesting piece of backstory, that she's considered like a tease who like slept with her previous boss and stuff. And Arash's character, the other journalist, is like, feels like he needs to bring it up with him. You know what I mean? Like he just felt like he needed to approach her with this kind. She's like upset.
Yeah. All right, so like the scene where she's in the serial killer's house, whatever happens, there's a man that's followed her, that supported her right there, right? So yeah, if she screams, if they find her, she says, this is what happened. There's a man that says, yes, this happened. I was with her. I followed her. That can't be the same when she was with the officer, right? If the officer did something, if she went and she was like, yeah, this guy did this to me, nobody would believe her because no one was there to support her, whatever. Same with what happened at her office, I guess, with her boss. Yeah. No one there to sort of have her back. And so these people feel entitled to ask, oh, so what did happen? I feel like for a woman's voice to be heard, there needs to be a man's voice to support what happened to her. Or at least that's what I felt like was being sort of shown in the film.
Yeah.
And to your point too, it's not until you start to hear men outside the window when she's yelling at like towards the end of the film. Once you hear men responding from outside, that's when the killer really gets scared.
Yeah.
Because at first, he still thinks he's in control and he's threatening her to come back in, right? And he's trying to fight her
Yeah.
when she's by the window. But then the second that you can hear other men starting to respond, then he gets really scared.
Just like, when his wife told him, oh, our neighbor saw you with another woman. And he's like, oh, she doesn't know what she's talking about. Like, just like dismissed the neighbor.
Yeah. I think also that scene where she's talking about her editor, like her boss, sets up the scene with the officer. I think it foreshadows it, and it also kind of goes hand in hand, obviously, because it's as audience, we're supposed to be a little triggered by it and to be like, oh no, this is happening to her again.
So one thing that really strikes me as fascinating about this film, and it's actually one of my favorite things, is he is not kidnapped at the end. He's kidnapped just past the halfway point. Not kidnapped. He's arrested.
Oh,
just
I was
past the
like,
halfway
what are you
point of the
talking
film.
about? What
Who
movie
was
did you
kidnapped?
watch?
Halfway. Arrested.
This is where we
halfway.
find out. This is where we find out that Kaveh was on the side of the murderer.
yeah. It's really the injustices committed upon him. It really broke my heart. Arrested is the word I'm looking for. Listen, English is my second language. I speak fluent Farsi, obviously. So at that point he's arrested. The police force, of course, gets all the credit for arresting him because they go up there and they do the thing. But really, I start liking the movie once he's arrested a lot more because I start really feeling like this is what he's saying about society in Iran. He's making jokes in court. You're noticing that, and it's like there's something darker to me, or just as dark, about how supportive his wife is being about this, telling his kids he was out. It's like at this point you're like, oh, she's gonna find out what he's been doing, and then when you find out what she's doing, like, well, your father was out there cleaning the streets of rotten women, and he was doing the right thing, and you're like, oh my goodness, this is like deep rooted toxicity, and then he's got the supporters chanting outside. And you got the son. And it's a different film at this point. It's no longer the Fincher tension dark thriller. It's almost like becoming a courtroom drama, a sociological drama about the state of Iran. I started liking the film more at this point.
Me too.
Yeah, that's where you truly see what the society was like at the time.
And now.
And now. Just like having seen the documentary and having seen his mom and his wife talk about just like it's exactly like that in the film. And I think the documentary was a big inspiration probably to the director.
Yeah, and also like when you see, because I didn't realize how accurate the more research I did, I was like, oh, this film is actually very close beat to beat to what actually happened. To the point where even the footage of his son, which is the last scenes you see in the film of him sort of like being like, I might have to take up the reins, and people are asking me, will I continue my father's work? That video footage is real, and the son looks just like the actor who played his son, and it's so chilling. It's such a chilling ending to the movie where he's reenacting the crimes with his younger sister. It's like, this is when I start feeling like, oh, now we're cooking with something thematically, and there's, because the film, it's like Arzu is saying to her colleague that it's not over yet. They're going to find a way to let him go. And you meet that grandpa and grandma that really broke my heart. The actors are so good, especially the guy who played the grandfather.
Yeah.
Who, Sadaf, remind me of the word. Is it Qisas or something? Qisas, right?
Qisas, yeah.
Where it's like you, if someone has committed a crime towards you, you can get paid essentially to let them off the execution line. So your family will get financial compensation, but that person will not receive execution, or you don't get the financial compensation and that person will receive their punishment, which is, in this case, execution. And the grandparents are talking about how, what are we to do? We don't want our granddaughter to become the same way. So we're going to consider taking the money. And I thought when he breaks down and cries, how good is that actor? Did you not feel like that guy was so like, where did you find this guy?
He's so good. So one thing that I'll also mention, and this might be getting pretty personal, but one of my cousins was killed in Iran by a man. And when it was brought up that they could execute him for what he had done, part of his execution was an exchange where my family would have to give money to the family of the person who killed my cousin. So you basically had to pay for the execution.
Yeah.
And the reason for it was that in the justice system, quote unquote, justice system in Iran, a man is worth twice the life of a woman's life.
Yeah.
So he killed my cousin, who was a woman, but if he was to be executed, right, like it's almost like double the cost.
Yeah.
So my family would have had to offset the cost of half a life. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that would have had to like counteract it. And I think that's also why when he's sentenced to death, he's not sentenced 17 death sentences. They give him like 8 death sentences or whatever.
Yeah. I was going to say that Asghar Farhadi's Shahr-e-Ziba is about that. Actually, have you seen it?
No.
I have not.
So it's about a father who wants the murderer of his daughter executed, but he has to find the money to make it happen. Yeah.
Also, I should, just to give a little resolution to the story. In the end,
I was gonna ask, but I didn't know if you wanted to go on. I was just like,
Yeah.
I was like, what happened?
So in the end, my aunt decided, because she's like the matriarch of that family, right? Because it was her daughter. She had decided that they wouldn't be giving money to the family of the killer, but instead they would accept him going to jail. Because she was also like, I don't want this guy to basically be just absolved of this death, executed immediately, and then his family gets to use that money and go on like a vacation somewhere. She's like, that's not right. She's like, he needs to go to jail, and he needs to reflect on the actions and on what he did, and remember every day the family that he tore apart.
Did they have to pay for that? For
No.
prison?
No.
Last thing I will ask you guys before we jump into behind the scenes. I really hope one of you guys can explain this to me. I really, really want to know. What is the back and forth with them sentencing him, then telling him he's going to be let go, and then hanging him anyways? Because I don't know what that means. I don't understand it seemed like a needless middle step for plot. Is it like plot suspense, or is it the reality of how it went down? Was it the intention to let him go, but then because he did something, they changed their minds? Or like, what is that?
I think that was so clever of him to put it in there. And that was my favorite. That's so important, how he showed it. I think he also mentions it in his interviews that he tried to keep like a neutral point of view. So you see a bit of what the murderer's life was like and the women and all that.
I see.
And I think those scenes were really important because, so this goes back, and they mention this in the film, because of the elections. They are trying to speed up his trial and the process.
Yeah.
This goes back in 2000, 2001. It was the second round of elections for Khatami, who's a reformist. And so reformists, with Khatami, he opened up the press a little bit. So at the time of the election, it made sense to actually have him hanged for his crimes. Yeah. Whereas with the current government, I wouldn't be so sure if they would have done that. So there's a very fine line between the two parties in Iran, between those religious people and those reformists. So I think it was clever of him to show that. Even at the very last minute, you didn't know how the scale would have tipped.
Right.
And it's like that with Iran every day.
So it's like from a character perspective, do you think it's like those two that are his friends that came into his jail cell? Are they part of it, or they're just being told that he's going to be let go?
I read somewhere when he was about to be hanged, or was it in the documentary where he said, "This isn't what you told me was going to happen." Like in reality,
yeah.
So I'm wondering if they just
interesting
told him to shut him up and be like, "Oh, you'll be fine."
Yeah.
But also just thematically, I feel like they just wanted to show that, to be like, there were forces that wanted him to live, and had the government or had the situation had been different, that he might have lived, that they might have opened that door.
That's interesting.
I wouldn't be surprised if the press could hear him yelling all that stuff. Like when he's being taken to the noose, And he's like, where's the car? You said there'd be a car. Like even all of that.
Yeah.
So are you saying, Sadaf, that was confirmed that they heard that? Like that was in the documentary?
I don't know where I read it because I've been reading a lot, but like
Right. But you did read somewhere that
before he was about to get hanged, he was like, "This is not what you told me was gonna happen. This is not what was supposed to happen." Kind of. So like he didn't believe it.
I wouldn't be surprised if there is a level of either they like lied to him to save face or whatever in the moment, or if behind the scenes forces were actually constantly flip-flopping on what they should and shouldn't do.
Yeah.
Because like even if you look at, for example, at the inception of the Islamic Republic, when you look at the way that the hostage crisis was dealt with, there was a lot of flip-flopping that happened internally about it. Like they had apparently told the American government that they were going to let them go, that the students took the hostages without consulting them. And then later they realized, oh, this is actually good for morale. So they held on to them. Then they were going to release them later.
Yeah.
And he made a deal with Carter. And then later there was like, apparently Reagan's administration got in contact and convinced them to keep them. So then they kept them longer. So there was a lot of like back and forth, depending on the time of day and how somebody's feeling and how they think it will benefit the regime or the government or somebody in power, they will switch things on a dime. Like the idea of law and order, I think, is pretty loosey-goosey, and it really comes down to what is the most useful thing that we can do in a given situation to benefit the powers that be.
Yeah.
And I think that we just witnessed that at play there.
And also in the documentary, they do mention that he didn't rape the victims, but they were indicating that he did rape. Like before they found Saeed Hanai, there were no reports of the victims having been, raped. But then after they found him, after they built the case, the report started changing to like he did rape the victims, as if to like make it seemed like he deserved.
Oh, interesting.
Not that he didn't deserve it, but
but they want to feel more justified.
Yeah.
Oh, to quell the people who were
Supporters of him.
like supporting him.
Yeah.
I talked to Hani Abu Asad, maybe you know him, he's from Palestine, and he made Huda Salon, in which there's also female nudity. And there was a huge backlash. Two of the two main actresses, they are in hiding. Do you fear for Sarah, for instance, or maybe the one who's playing the killer, Saeed?
I do. I'm not saying I fear for them, but I'm concerned. And to be honest, part of the way this whole thing works, the system of, the taboo system, the censorship system, a big part of it is they want you to adhere to unwritten rules, like the former Soviet. They don't tell you the rules. They don't tell you this is not what you should and shouldn't do. And that, in effect, will make you self-censor because like your imagination is always like, oh, what would they do? What the consequence of this would be, blah, blah, blah. And I decided like, you know what? I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck. And I do give a fuck, I'm concerned. Of course I am. But I choose not to give a fuck because that's the only way I can work,
But you're working from the outside.
I'm fucking proud of the fact that the, combination of factors and events gave us the chance to make a truly independent Iranian movie. Because a lot of the other Iranian movies that, for example, are made in Iran, many of them are, even the independent movies are being, sometimes produced by like the cultural arm of Revolutionary Guard. You know what I mean? Yeah. Or on the other side, you have like Hollywood hit jobs. You have Argos. You have it's like everybody has a stake in this. I don't have a fucking stake. My stake is that to show some sort of reality or authenticity for once. That's my stake.
Ready to move to behind the scenes and trivia?
Yeah.
I'll just rapid fire a few things and you tell me if you knew that or didn't know that or act surprised or act impressed.
All right.
Obviously, this was based on the true Iranian serial killer, Saeed Hanai. And a lot of it, even down to the fact that he was a laborer and an Iraq war veteran, is true. And he reportedly began his crime spree when someone mistook his wife for a prostitute.
Oh.
Yeah.
Which is weird. Zahra Amir Ibrahimi, she was initially involved in the film as a casting director, and they'd gone through an arduous process of trying to find the right actress to play the role she ended up playing. When they found the right one, the woman who was going to play the role canceled like weeks before production started. And Zahra said that she was like so mad. She was throwing like papers and phones in like a hotel room, and Ali was trying to calm her down. She was really upset. And then Ali kind of watched her in her anger and thought like, this is actually very true to the character, and considered asking her to try a few, like not auditions, but like, how do you feel about potentially playing the role? And they discussed it kind of together. And after like auditioning 50 actresses for the role previous to this, they kind of literally had found the best. And I think she's phenomenal in the film. And it's just interesting from behind the scenes perspective that she was literally the casting director who found the right person and ended up being herself.
That is interesting. And isn't the main actor and his son, like aren't they both from Iran?
Who? Which one?
So the main actor, what's his name?
The serial killer?
The serial killer. So I just wonder.
Mehdi Bajestani.
Oh, yeah. Mehdi Bajestani, yes.
Yeah.
So he's based in Iran?
He's based in Iran.
Well, that's interesting because the other fact about this is that Zahra went and won the Cannes, what was it? The
Cannes.
She won the award for Best Actress at Cannes Film Festival, right?
Yeah.
And I guess the Iranian authorities and the Islamic government called it an insulting and politically motivated move to give her the award.
Classic.
They said the film was blasphemy, and some have even gone further, calling for their executions involved. The Iranian Organization of Cinema and Audiovisual Affairs, which operates under the auspices of the Military of Culture and Islamic Guidance, released a statement calling the film shameless obscenity, adding that it was the product of the twisted mind of an Iranian Danish man, and condemning the film festival for awarding Ibrahimi the role.
Did you say Military of Culture? Is it Ministry?
Ministry.
Okay. I thought you said military, and I was like, whoa, they're not even hiding it.
But yeah, and Ibrahimi said she's received over 200 death threats from people because this is the society we live in.
Yeah.
So it's weird because I would have imagined that any actor now involved in that movie would have a tough time living in Iran now after their involvement.
I mean, he's a man, so...
Yes, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
And it's justifiable that the woman that they had chosen decided to not be a part of the film. I understand that. Because she was from Iran. The actress that they had. Very talented.
Yeah, she would have had to have left Iran before the movie came out.
Yeah.
The real-life serial killer, after Hanai's arrest, some religious hardliners excused and even praised his crimes, arguing that he had tried to cleanse Iran of moral corruption, which is right in the film. Who is to be judged, wrote the conservative newspaper Jomhuri Islami. Those who look to eradicate the sickness or those who stand at the root of the corruption. Just wonderful statements.
My God.
Such sentiments were expressed by the killer's merchant's friends at the Mashhad Bazaar, one of whom had said he did the right thing. He should have continued.
Oh my God.
My God.
And of course, the incident was the subject of the 2002 documentary And Along Came a Spider, directed by Maziar Bahari, and it included an interview with Hanai and his son, which is the footage that we see recreated at the end of the movie, who's essentially word for word saying the same things about the son picking up the torch, quote unquote, after his father. In 2020, a film called Killer Spider was directed by Ibrahim Irajzad. And the director of that movie accused Abbasi of plagiarism and circumventing Iranian censorship in order to make the film sooner, claiming that he could have shot it in Iran had he been prepared to wait for government approval like Irajzad had to. So he's actually quite upset about this film and saying that he plagiarized a lot of his stuff. That's according to Wikipedia, so who knows?
I mean, it's based on true events. Like, what are you plagiarizing?
Right, you're right. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
So, I bet you there's like 3 movies that have just gone into development over Dariush Mehjui in Iran and outside of Iran.
And I just like moving that right into critical reactions. I pulled one middle of the road review for the film just because I felt it encapsulates how I feel about it. Catherine Bray of Empire magazine said it's a frustrating but fascinating film made by an evidently talented filmmaker, which never quite manages to resolve the tensions between its apparent moral purpose and the formal flair with which it depicts events it purports to condemn. About the deeper analysis section, Farhan, you were saying that we sort of touched on it?
I felt like it, especially because we mentioned how a lot of the scenes in the movie were pretty reflective of the society, or were making commentary on the reality around the movie or around the experiences of the filmmaker.
Right. I agree.
There's another thing I forgot to mention about my reaction to the film. And it's something that I think he talks about too. I've watched so many, like I grew up in Iran watching so many Iranian media. I've gotten used to seeing women with headscarves within like their rooms, their bedrooms, right? And like just not seeing that, like actually seeing what the women would wear within the four walls of their homes. I just became conscious of it when I was watching the film. And it's a mix of sort of Western media and Iranian media, in that where you have the scenes where they're in public, it's very much like Iranian films you see, you know, women covered and all that. But then you move into like the more personal, intimate spaces, whether it be in the hotel room or in the murderer's house with his wife and all that. Then it becomes, especially the part where him and his wife are getting intimate, it becomes very Western. And then, you know, your mind quickly switches. Okay, yeah, I've been exposed to this kind of footage, but not in Iranian media, in Western media.
Yeah.
And then I think the one scene that surprised me was the very end where Rahimi kisses Sharifi on the cheek. Because her with Sharifi, they were always in those public spaces, and it was very much the footage I was used to seeing in like Iranian films. And then seeing that at the end, I was like, oh, I just became conscious of it. I was like, oh, that's unexpected.
That's funny. See, when I saw Iranian movies as a kid here, and I would see families in their house wearing hijabs, I remember growing up as a kid and being like, this is ridiculous. Like it would take me out of the movie. So it's funny that now the opposite of that is what kind of took you out of the movie for a second.
Yeah. And that's the power of censorship.
I've
been conditioned to.
Yeah.
Well, it's like when you watch a Bollywood movie and like, I can't remember what it was, but I saw some Bollywood movie where someone actually kissed somebody, and I was like, oh my God. Like it was like the biggest deal.
Right.
Because they never show that stuff in Bollywood films that I grew up watching. So when I saw it, I was like, whoa.
Yeah. We were so not used to seeing kissing or affection on screen in Iran that when we watched like Disney cartoons, it was weird seeing like the prince and the princess kissing. So if we were in a group of like with our cousins, we were like, look away, this is the kissing scene.
That's so funny.
Like at Disney.
The one thing I will say about deeper analysis is that I didn't think there was that much subtext because it's all surface level. I feel like Abbasi's saying very clearly the things he wants to say about this movie. And like, again, comparing him to Fincher's always like, I'm going to peel back the mask of society and reveal how gritty and rotten and evil it all is. Like he's doing that with, again, Seven and even Fight Club and stuff. It's just like, I'm going to peel back the mask. But like in Iranian society, I feel like there is no mask. They're just like plain-faced, obvious about how evil and corrupt they are. So it's like with Abbasi's film, it's like, he didn't even have to go so far as like, I'm going to reveal how corrupt this whole system. I mean, maybe to a Western audience who like really doesn't know, but I think for like an Iranian audience, you're like, yeah, this tracks. Like this is exactly what I know from like at least from this government and like in terms of the hierarchy of power. We're like, yeah, this is exactly how corrupt we all know it to be.
It's funny because for me, I felt like there was some subtext in that. I wouldn't necessarily say in terms of the commentary that you're talking about. That stuff I think was very on the nose, and I think was meant to be. But like, again, going back to that opening scene, I think part of it was what we were talking about, where he's like trying to be like, this isn't like Iranian cinema. This is more real. This is more gritty. This is more true, blah, 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 blah. And then even using the 9/11 footage, I think was about showing parallels between different groups of people who do horrific acts in the name of what they believe to be justice.
But that's not subtext. That's text. Like that's there. Like we talked about how it's so like on. It's out there. It's
I
like
still
really
think some of it is subtext. Like for it to not be subtext, I think the character, someone watching TV would have to be like, you know, this is kind of like that murderer guy who's going, you know what I mean? Then it's like, okay, that's text.
That's exposition at that point.
Sure.
That's bad writing.
Sure. I still think that you should give them a little more credit. I think that there is a little bit of subtext there. It might not be as deep as some of Fincher's stuff, but and I would actually, I'm in the camp that I find sometimes Fincher is too on the nose with some of his subtext.
Yeah. I can see that. I don't disagree.
Sadaf, what do you
I was just thinking about the language too in the film. The curse words they use, that's also very...
Which
something
one? Some
you
of them.
don't hear.
Farhan might have to push the censor button, but what are some of the ones that got your attention?
Well, I can't say them.
You can say it.
They use some like curse words.
Yeah, they do.
Especially
They
at the
certainly do.
beginning. I feel like at the beginning, there's more of, you know, the curse words, the scenes, and then it's sort of just like deliberately.
Yeah, and again, I think that's about him trying to shock the audience to learning that this is a different type of film.
This ain't your grandfather's Iranian film.
Exactly.
This is a new generation Iranian film.
Yeah.
We're punk rock and visceral.
Yeah, that being said, I do wish that it was drawn out more and it was more subtle. And as the movie went on, it built on that more and more. Because imagine if you felt like it was like those other Iranian films, and then all of a sudden you're in a scene where she like takes off her hijab, or you're in a scene where like somebody cusses somebody out,
Yeah.
or there's like you have one explicit sex scene or whatever instead of like all of them. To me,
That
that's
would've
kind of
been,
like, then it's like, oh, okay, I see. Similar to how that kiss on the cheek for you, because the whole time you see her relationship with her journalist partner is very much like your grandfather's Iranian film. That when she kisses him on the cheek, that elicited a response, you know?
Best scene. Sadaf, please, you take the lead.
When they're taking him to get him, like hang him. I think that was the best scene, and I've explained it a bit why I think that's a really good scene where we don't know if he's going to be hanged or not. Actually, for me, I was like, did they hang him? And then I was like, yes, they did. What if they didn't? What if they took him out the back door and they hung someone else? But that just tells you about the atmosphere in Iran, like the religious and political atmosphere, that it could have gone either way. Had it been a different government, it might have gone a different way. So that was that was a good scene.
Well, especially because right before that too, when they're showing his lashing.
Oh yeah, exactly.
It shows that the lashing is fake.
Yeah.
So it's really playing up the fact that like, okay, this is all fake. He's not gonna get his comeuppance.
Yeah.
And then when he actually gets hung, you're like, oh, they actually did it.
Hanged.
Hanged. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's cathartic when he gets hanged because you're finally like seeing
Hanged until dead.
hanged till death. I agree. That's one of my favorite scenes too, just because of how cathartic it is. I also really like his quote unquote confessional in court, just because of like, I actually was like one of my a bit of the writing I really liked, where he's like, "You're gonna ask me to come up here? I'm crazy. Of course I'm crazy. I'm crazy about the eighth Imam. I'm crazy about Quran. I'm crazy about cleansing the streets of these whores. I'm crazy about God." And they started pulling him away. I was just like, oh, that's like, I don't know. There's something about like his like grandstanding of pride he has for his thing. I thought it was like not because I'm on his side, but I'm just like, it's a powerful moment within the film. Like you're like, this guy is, they're like, he's essentially being cheered on as he gets pulled away. And you're like,
yeah.
من چی میتونم بگم؟ بله اون دیوانه امام هشتم
آقای عظیمی
دیوانه امام رضا
آقای عظیمی
دیوانه اینن که جهاد از فساد پاک
آقای عظیمی دادگاه و صحنش جایگاه موضع شما نیست
به نظر شما من دیوانه به نظر شما من دیوانه
یا به سوالات پاسخ بدید یا دستور میدم شما رو از دادگاه بندازم بیرون.
اگه عمل به وظیفه دیوانگی اجازه بده صاحب. اگه عمل به وظیفه دیوانگی
بفرمایید بیرون.
جناب قاضی.
بفرمایید.
دیوانه امام اشتومن.
دیوانه اینم که جهان از فساد پاک بشه. برو بیرون.
چه اشکال داره این مدل دیوانگی؟
هدایت کنید.
چطور با من دیوانه دیوانه خدا دیوانه خدا.
I have that as my favorite scene as well, for the same reasons that you just said. I think the fact that the audience in the courtroom is so into it and so supportive of him is really dark. And I think that it really sets in and it reminds the audience that, like, oh, he might get off,
Yeah.
despite the fact that he's just admitted to all of this stuff openly. I did have another scene that was kind of tied for best scene. Yeah. The scene where Arzu and Sharifi are interviewing him with the camera.
Mm-hmm.
That was another scene where I was like, oh, this is good. And that was tense. And I actually wish that scene had gone longer because I felt like the ending of that scene was pretty abrupt. But it was definitely building tension there. And where you see the conflict between the two of them, and they're like sitting there face to face having a conversation, which I thought was done so well. And I think any movie where you can take opposing philosophies and force them to sit down and just talk, I think is a really great opportunity to naturally build tension.
Joker and Batman.
Joker and
Nolan.
Batman. Yeah.
There's also something about he goes like the chilling moment of you killed 16 women, and he looks at her, he's like almost 17.
Almost 17.
Yeah.
That's like such a chilling line.
And he's smiling.
Yeah.
Just the fact that he is to be hanged and he still feels confident enough to say that.
Yeah. And the other messed up thing too in that scene is, even if you accept the fact that this guy has his own moral code, his own moral code is out the window there because she's not even a sex worker. You know what I mean? So it's a scenario where his own moral code is completely compromised by himself.
Least favorite scene. Farn, you go first.
My least favorite scene is watching his family crying in the prison. I didn't need to see that. It was too much.
Sadaf?
I think I'd mentioned this. Just her, I like how she talks to her mom, but the following scene, I don't know. It just didn't sit with me. I feel like, because she was like saying, yeah, I'm okay. Everything's going to be okay. And the next scene, she's like, she has the makeup on and she's acting like a bait. And like, I don't know. For me, it was like, it's a bit unrealistic to me. Like, as a woman, I don't know. I feel like there needed to be more build up, like preparation, showing us more preparation for her to get to that point.
A cousin of mine who did see the documentary I was talking to today said that part, it's one of the few parts that's actually made up for the film, that the journalist didn't go out as bait in real life. I think it was just the 17th sex worker that he was almost about to kill actually got away.
Yeah.
And then was actually arrested herself for.
Yeah. And that's how they found out. Yeah.
Wait, what?
Yeah. That's how they found
part?
out. Just that one of the women ran away.
Got away.
And then they arrested her for another thing. And then when they, I guess, interviewed her or whatever, they found out that.
Essentially what happened with Arzu, but Arzu in real life
was a reporter.
wasn't a journalist in real life, was a sex worker and got away.
Oh, I did not know that.
My least favorite scene is that when he kills that one sex worker who and I'll get into this later on about nitpicks, but when he hears her voice after he's already killed her, laughing, that whole scene, I was like, okay, this is one too many scenes. Like, it's a little bit drawn out of how viciously he's killing these women, but also I didn't like the potential justification of him being crazy.
Yeah, 100%. Couldn't agree with you more.
I would say in the documentary, I don't know if this was from the documentary, but he mentions that one of his victims was still alive after he had strangled her and she was breathing, and then he went back, and like he explains it in detail how he like put his knees on her. So I just wonder.
But that wasn't with this woman. It's like he's seeing her laugh, and then we cut from like an outsider perspective, and she's not. She's dead.
She's dead. Yeah.
So that moment was actually not 100% clear for me. I wasn't sure if that was an issue with editing, that she was actually alive and giggling at him, and then we just don't see her transition from laughing to being dead, or if that was a situation where it was in his head and that abrupt cut shows us that, oh, she is actually dead and that was all in his head. So if that was a situation where it was intentionally cut abruptly to show that he was hallucinating, then Kava, I would agree with you. And that is the feeling that I had. But given what Sadaf just said, I think that it's possible that it was just an issue with either coverage or editing.
But the one thing I'd say to like probably the reason I eliminate that possibility of it being that she was still dead is that the appropriate reaction for her to be having that moment would not be to laugh, even if she was a bit like crazy or on drugs or whatever, because she's not laughing up until that moment. Like, so in that moment, if she was even a bit conscious, like the real woman might have been in real life, the reaction is probably still to try to scream or cry for help or try to get up and run away, not laugh.
Sure, yeah.
The fact that it's specifically a Joker-esque laugh coming out of her makes me think like, I'm like, this is not happening in reality.
That's fair.
Because why would the victim be laughing like this?
Yeah.
That's what he would be assuming the corpse is doing now.
Yep.
Okay, Damn, That's Poetry, where we discuss our favorite quotes from the film. I'll go first because I really quickly want to say, like, I tried to scan it a lot, and I think a lot of the films we do are very poetic and beautiful in nature. I didn't find this a very quotable movie. I like tried to find moments that I was like, yeah, that's like such an interesting line, or that's such a captivating moment for an actor. I was like, nothing really. Maybe the part where he talks about, I am crazy about the eighth imam. I'm crazy about this. Like that quote was almost like that could have been in the trailer almost.
Just the one thing, because just like Yukov, I didn't find, like, nothing was that memorable in terms of like quotes. But just like scanning through the film again, the part where Rahimi meets Sora's mom, Soraya, and she says he's cleaning up the streets for them. Do you think they're going to arrest him?
یارو داره خیابونا رو واسهشون پاک میکنه. میان بگیرنش.
Just sort of speaks to what the message of the film also.
Yeah,
like,
of course, yeah.
You know what, Sadaf? I think you're right. That is also my favorite quote. It's not poetic, but I would agree with you.
Favorite performance? I'm torn between two, so I'll let Sadaf go first.
I think Mehdi Bajestani. I think I really liked his performance. But just so that the
serial killer,
the main actor,
I'd say I'm torn between Zara Amir Ibrahimi and Mehdi because I think they're both really good and they both do great performance.
Yeah, I would agree. They're both phenomenal. I'm gonna say it's the old man who's crying over his daughter. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, he's really good. I thought about it at one point.
For a split second in that scene, I was like, "Yo, this guy's moving up in the power ranking." But I think
the mother.
She was
other
good
mother,
too.
the drug addicts, the sex
yeah.
worker drug addict who killed
She
her
was good
mother.
too.
I'm like,
She was
she's
good
so
too.
good.
Yeah.
She was good. Yeah.
Actors come from.
Yeah. I think I'll also give it to Mehdi. I think it's not a contest. It's a little bit of a contest.
Yeah.
But, I mean,
well, Cannes Film Festival certainly considers a contest, and they give it to Zara.
Zara is incredible. Mehdi is
yeah.
also incredible. I think the reason that Mehdi's performance sticks out to me a little more is because he's playing this really sadistic person. So I think that that was something that performance stood out to me more because of that. That's not to say that he's more or less talented than her. That's just the performance that stood out to me. And I will also say the guy who played Sharifi and the guy who played Rostami, both of them were also pretty good. The person who played Fatima, she was good as well. Like those three, I thought were also really, really good.
I think all around the cast were really good.
Yeah, very strong.
Even the son.
Even the little girl. The little girl even did a really good job at like playing a little girl in those scenes. And I like
Yeah.
that, like, oftentimes when there's like kids, like in Iranian movies, it's so over the top, their performance. They're like, Mama June, and you're like, oh, this is grating. I don't want to like see this. I don't want to hear this.
Mm-hmm.
But she was very sweet.
Yeah.
You know, like even though she's acting out this like dead body, she was very sweet in the way that you're like, oh, this is the way that a child sees the world and sees this reality.
Just a slight shout out to a smaller role in the film. Nima Akbarpur, who played the judge in that first. I don't know if he was the judge in the courtroom scene. I think it was, but the judge in that scene when it's just the three of them in the room though, Arzu, Sharifi, and the judge. I was like, because I'm like, he really plays that role and does such a good job, and he really becomes that judge character. And I'm like, this is crazy that this is just an actor, you know, like, you know what I mean? Like, I thought he just very convincingly played that role. He really kind of felt like that.
Oh yeah, he straight up didn't feel like an actor. Like it
that's
what
I mean.
Like I was watching like some mullah or ayatollah or whatever. Just like.
And I think Sharifi is a competent actor too. Shout out Arash, who's probably going to listen to this, and I think you're great.
No, he was
love
great.
you, man. Nitpicks and hot takes. I have a few. I'll just fire off and then see if you guys have any to add. The wife comes in and almost catches him murdering that woman, and he had rolled her in the carpet, and she doesn't notice there's a body under that rug.
Yeah.
Like she even notices the rug, and he's like, "What happened?" He's like, "Oh, there's a leak. I just, I'm cleaning up or whatever." And she's like, "But why'd you roll up the rug?" If there's a body under a rug, you'll notice it, right?
Yeah, I didn't buy that.
I didn't buy that at all.
No.
And I also thought, just as like a nitpick, like the daughter finding the apple with the lipstick, I thought was a wasted opportunity because I'd forgotten what happened. And even the first time, I thought they'd say them like, "Oh, she bit she's gonna be lipstick." And even if the wife finds it and doesn't think he's a murderer, at least the wife's gonna find it and think he's having an affair. And I was like, "Oh, that's her." But when the daughter finds it and doesn't know what it is, and then he just throws it out, I just thought there could have been more taken out of that moment. Like the wife finding it could have actually been a very interesting, dramatic moment for the dialogue to be like, "I know what you're doing," and he's like, "What?" Like, you can come out and just say it. And like, you almost feel like she's going to save the serial killer, but then she's like, "You're having an affair." And you know what I mean? Like, that could have been like a very interesting line.
That actually summarizes the gist of my my nitpicks with the film, is that I feel like there were a lot of opportunities to build tension that were wasted. And that's one of them. I think that there were so many opportunities throughout the film that were set up to build this ambiguity or to build the tension against different characters, and it didn't happen. And instead, where we had intensity made in the film was often just overtly thrown in your face through violence against women that was sometimes too gratuitous, I found. And that's kind of the crux of it for me. And I've already kind of mentioned it, but that's it for me.
I do wonder, because like in reality, he did murder 16 women in just like a year, in like 12 months. And like it became so easy for him. So maybe even showing that his wife didn't find the apple, or like showing that there was no one really suspected anything, kind of made him want to do it more, because maybe he felt like he was doing the right thing and he wasn't getting caught. So God was on his side.
That'd be interesting, because then you could get into a whole viewpoint of the film where he starts to kind of doubt his own faith. Because like now when the apple is found, for example, he's like, "Oh wait, maybe God doesn't want me to do this," right? Like there's a whole version of this where you can see this guy derailing internally and kind of questioning his own moral code, because he's starting to get caught and because people are questioning whether or not these people should die.
No, but we are talking about a society where men do things and they're not questioned for them. And they get away with it so easily.
Yeah.
Stupid men. The worst.
Even like at near the end, where he takes his hand out and rain he feels the rain, but there's no rain. It's like he thinks there is rain because he thinks he was doing this right thing, and now God is like, now the drought is over.
Oh, there you go. That's your deeper analysis right there.
Yeah, that was the Because even in the documentary, in the interview, he does mention that. He's like, there was drought, and then I killed a few women, and then there was rain. In the documentary, he says that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Do you guys have other stuff for nitpicks and hot takes?
One thing I do have. So the first scene, we see Sharifi and Rahimi talking in the office, and then he talks about how he gets his calls and all that. Have you noticed the sleeves? Continuity.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah. His sleeves change.
His sleeves change. It's a big continuity flaw, but like really experienced editors were on this. And people have talked about how this might just be a mistake or intentional. And today I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, in Iranian films, for a man to have his sleeve up or down doesn't really make a difference in continuity wise either. For a woman to have her sleeves up and down, the editor has to be really careful with how they edit the film.
Right. Yeah.
So I just wonder if it was intentional. Even if it wasn't, it's just interesting.
That's a weird thing to be intentional.
Yeah.
I think people are giving them a lot of grace there. The thing that I was going to mention when you said this, it kind of reminded me, another missed opportunity to build tension is showing scenes where he like receives a phone call from him.
Yeah.
And then they're like rushing to get the tape recorder or whatever, right? And they're like listening in, and he's like, and this is the first time she hears his voice or whatever it is. Like that, you could build so much tension there.
Because there was also like at one point when they finally meet, Sharifi meets the serial killer. At one point, he's like, it's you. It's finally putting a face to the name. We've had so many conversations. And at that point, I'm like, oh yeah, there was a time. Like I'd almost forgotten because it's such a thing early on. I'm like, oh yeah, they were exchanging phone conversations a few times. And it's sort of like, you just pay a little sprinkle of it and then goes, and I'd forgotten that by the time he mentions it, I was like, oh, all right.
And going back to Fincher, he does that a lot in a lot of his movies where he'll have the killer or the bad guy or whatever have a phone call, and it's like chilling because it's all from the one side. And again, I think that the reason that you can build that tension so well is because you have that ambiguity. You're not seeing this guy. You don't see where he is. So I think maybe even showing less of the killer throughout the film, I think would have definitely benefited the film.
Yeah, I wonder that too myself. What aged poorly, which could also still go into nitpicks and hot takes. We all kind of put it in together in the same group. Do you have stuff that aged poorly? I mean, the film just came out a year ago.
It just came out, but I'm hoping the violence will age poorly and we'll see less of that.
And actually, there's been a trend of movies that depict violence against women to such a degree to try to be like provocative and whatever, which I think is already super dated. It's been done. We don't need to see it. It's triggering to a lot of people in the audience.
Yeah.
And I guess we've never seen it in an Iranian movie like this. So you could be like, oh, it's like bringing this genre of films to Iranian cinema. But for me, it's like, yeah, but that's like a genre that we don't need.
Yeah.
I would just say, and I agree with both of you guys on that. I would just say, so this is slightly nitpick, but what aged poorly for me slightly is, does he have to be crazy? Because there's a very direct and overt implication that he's hearing the dead woman laugh. And then when Arzu gets away, he crumbles up into a ball and has a Joker laugh to himself.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
And
I
it's
forgot
like-
about that.
And I'm like, this is really hands down being like, this guy is crazy. And my thing of aging poorly is like, he doesn't even have to be crazy to be doing this stuff. This is just a product of a lot of the toxicity that exists within Iranian society that's raised under the Islamic regime. His son, it clearly, I mean, he hammers home the point I agree with more, that his son is now going to take up the reins and be this monster. And it's not, is the son crazy too? Or is he a product of the system that is like toxic? The trauma is passed down. And so I think by making him crazy, it's a bit of like, not it's an excuse, but he's sort of like justifying a little bit of like, well, this guy's crazy. That's why he's doing this. And I'm like, it's actually more powerful if he isn't crazy, and probably more realistic that he isn't crazy.
Interesting enough,
I agree.
because in the film they actually try to prove that he's crazy.
Exactly. To get him a lighter sentence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't think he has to be.
doesn't
Like,
need
I don't
that.
think he is.
Yeah.
To your point too, Kaveh, about, oh, it's the system that makes these people like this. It's not just the fact that they're crazy. It's this society and this system that is doing this to people.
Yeah.
imam guy literally says that about sex workers earlier on in the film anyway, which I actually found that was a little surprising. I didn't think that was going to happen. The fact that that guy was like, oh yeah, it's a condition of our society that that people who are poor have to do X, Y, Z. I was like, oh, okay, this is like, that's actually interesting, and I didn't.
But that's also just bullshit. That's the words they say in front of people too.
For sure.
Also.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't know if that's sincere. I'm just commenting on how I was surprised to see that in the film.
I thought the same thing too. I agree.
Yeah.
Double feature lineup. What movie do you think this would make a great double feature with?
With its own documentary.
That's a very good point. I really want to see that now.
Yeah, I need to watch it.
Shame on me for not doing the proper research.
The other one could be the other movie that was made in Iran about the same thing. The one that this allegedly plagiarized.
I would just say I'd go Zodiac. Watch it from an American worldview and watch it from an Iranian worldview, and see if there are similarities. That's my call. Can this be made into a modern Hollywood remake? I think no, because this is as close to a Hollywood remake as an Iranian film has gotten so far. And so this is like the Hollywood remake version of an Iranian movie.
I agree.
Yeah.
Both of you agree? All around?
Agree.
I had the exact same thought.
Me too.
This is basically the Hollywood version of the Iranian one, which we haven't seen.
Yes.
That this allegedly plagiarized.
Which we should have seen, maybe.
Yeah, but now we can save it for another episode.
Yeah.
Final thoughts and grades. This is your last chance to get any final thoughts you have that we haven't discussed and finish it off with a grade.
Kava, you go first. You give your grade first.
B-. I think it's so far the lowest grade. I feel, Farhan, if I'm going to predict, I feel like you give it a less, you're going to give it a lower grade. But I feel like this is a fair grade considering the fact that I think it's a well-made film. It does do something I hadn't seen Iranian cinema do to this point. It is way more interesting to me once he's arrested because I feel like the thematic stuff comes to the foreground in the most. But I feel the tension of the Fincher-esque stuff, cat and mouse game, isn't quite doing it for me. So it's not in the A realm for me. But I feel like if I were to grade this a C plus or a C, it's a little bit too low for the things that this film accomplished. I think it's the acting is great. I think the directing is very good. It's, for the most part, it's like doing the things it needs to do. And I really like the ending. The bone-chilling ending of the son really nails home for me like what this film is about. So I think a B- really kind of encapsulates everything I feel about this film. And if I were a strict teacher, I would be grading it that.
What do you think, Sadaf?
Just the final comment and thought on that last scene with the son. I like that scene. And it's like word for word from the documentary. Like the son actually said all that, and he actually reenacted on a mat. What he didn't do was he didn't ask his little sister to come and like replace the mat with his little sister, which I thought was interesting in the film. And it just reminded me of all the news I've seen of like honor killings happening with like the younger generation in Iran. It's something that's still happening. So I thought it was, having that scene with the little girl and her brother sort of, reenacting the what their father did was interesting and important. I would give it, I'm nicer than you, so I'll give it a B.
All right. Okay. That's fair. It's pretty much the same. We're very close to each other. It's not, I feel like we're in the same ballpark there.
Yeah.
My final note that I had jotted down was I liked that the film had a denouement. It bothers me to no end when Iranian movies just kind of end. This had a thing where we like see her on the bus and then she pulls up this scene and watches this scene of the boy's interview. I think that offers an opportunity for the audience to reflect on what they would just watched. And I really like when movies do that, when they give you a moment to reflect on what you just watched. Even if it ends on him basically alluding to the fact that he's going to take up the mantle of his father and it ends, right? Even if it just ends there, to me, it's still like that scene in and of itself is a denouement of the rest of the movie. You know what I mean? Because at this point, we've already wrapped up the movie. They said their goodbyes. The guy's dead. And now we get this like bonus scene that kind of encapsulates the themes of the rest of the movie. Overall, Kaveh, you are correct. I am a little more critical of your film. Or sorry, I am a little more critical.
My film?
I am a little more critical of this film.
Yeah.
I give it a C+.
Wow, I'm so good at predicting you now. That's what I thought you would have given it.
I thought
Exactly what I thought you'd give.
I thought you were going to give it a B-.
We're getting good at this. We've done this for too long.
I know. So then our average score for this is a B-.
B-, yeah.
It is. That's right. Should I wrap it up?
Mm.
Holy Spider is the first modern Iranian film noir. It's an unsettling, impactful analysis on how misogyny and gender-based violence outlasts the actions of one man due to environments and attitudes that allow it to persevere. It's a film that might not highlight any larger moral message other than to lift the veil on one corrupt man lifted up and protected by an even more corrupt system. A film that towards its end leaves no wonder as to why Abbasi decided to put the holy in front of Spider in the title. Sadaf, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Farhan, thank you so much for being present.
Thank you for being present.
Everybody, listeners, thank you for tuning in. And to the rest of you, Be'omi de Didar. Okay, that was our episode on Holy Spider, but don't go yet. We're wrapping up today's episode with a short interview with writer, editor, and director Arash Ashtiani. Though acting wasn't formally on his resume before Holy Spider, a chance encounter and a propensity to portray the character Abbasi was looking for led to Arash landing the role of Sharifi, the editor of a local newspaper who assists Arzu Rahimi on her quest to track down the infamous Spider Killer. Arash is a fantastic director, and I am proud to say that I met him back in film school. His short film, Only Sound Remains, was nominated for a BAFTA. His most recent work, The Tunnel, is a Vimeo staff pick. And he was the editor of a documentary titled My Father, currently premiering at IDFA, the International Documentary Film Festival in Amsterdam. Farhan and I had a chance to chat with Arash to get a little inside look of what it was like to work on one of Iran's most controversial films. Why don't we just start at the beginning? Arash, why don't you tell me how you first got involved in the process of Holy Spider and how the story sort of unfolded for you?
Hi guys, thanks for inviting me to your podcast, first of all. Few years before shooting, it was like a year before Corona, I met Zar and she was the casting director of Holy Spider. And we met in London, not related to any film or anything. And at the end of our meeting, she said, I'm casting for this film for Ali Abbasi, which I had seen Border and I had loved it. I didn't know even if he's like Iranian or half or if he speaks Farsi or not. So I got really interested, and the first thought that came to my mind was I was curious to see how other directors do audition, you know. Mm-hmm. I recorded a couple of videotapes, self-tape basically. I sent it to her. She directed me. She gave me more clues. And then I received a call to go to Berlin and do audition in front of Ali basically. I went there and I felt I messed it up really badly because I was like shaking and very... It was my first time like giving an audition, you know.
And you nailed it. Your first audition ever and you just did a wonderful job. You got the part.
Yes, thankfully. I think because they wanted to shoot it also in Iran, you know. Mm-hmm. After that round of audition, I think they told me they are going to find actors and see how they can shoot it in Iran. Mm-hmm. So I didn't hear from them for a year, and then there was COVID, and I thought, okay, they have most probably cast someone else. But then I received the phone call from Zara again, Zara Amir Ibrahimi. Mm-hmm. She said, you are still one of the option. How's your timing? And she gave me like some explanation that where are they shooting, when they want to shoot it. And
how did you know Zara? How did you meet Zara?
I edited a 3-episode documentary for BBC Persia about 40 best films after revolution. And Zar was presenting it. Mm-hmm. At the end of that night, she told me that they are casting, they are looking for actors.
So did she know that you would be interested in acting, or was she just telling you this and then you thought, hey, maybe I'll try it?
This is what I read from articles on how Ali works. Apparently, he does a very extensive search for actors. Like he spends long time and he tries so many people for the role. But because Zar definitely had read the script, they had things that they were looking for in people for different parts. I think just our basic interaction, she felt it that I might be suitable for that role.
Oh, cool. That's really cool.
I just think it's funny because a lot of actors spend so many years of their lives grinding and getting involved and like auditioning and playing in commercials and all this stuff. And it's like your very first audition, you get to play one of the lead roles in a film that gets into Cannes. You're like just walking the streets of the Cannes Film Festival and like you're the lead in a film. And it's just funny how life works, and it speaks to your sheer talent because you're a multi-talented director, artist, actor, editor. So good for you.
Half of the actors listening to the podcast right now are like gripping their steering wheel, like clenching their teeth, and the
so
other
upset.
half are like cheering you on.
Holy Spider is obviously based on real subject matter and a very serious crime that took place, and a crime that shook the Iranian population. Can you talk a little bit about the sensitivity around that and working on a film? Were there discussions on set about how sensitive this was, and was there awareness around how the reaction would be? And when you're working on the characters, was there discussions around making sure you're portraying this in a specific light?
Since I read the script, I felt it's something special or unique in terms of bypassing censors, and how they want to approach it. I mean, that was obvious from reading the script. On the set, we didn't specifically talk about how sensitive it is, really, We had that feeling that, because I want to say as an audience of Iranian cinema, I was born after revolution, and as audience of Iranian cinema, I never questioned the fact that like women wear hijabs in shower or when they want to sleep,
Yeah.
My reality has shifted to another reality,
Yeah.
And when I was on the set, I was feeling it, but when I saw the film, I found the depth of it, the depth of censor, basically.
Yeah.
Because, for example, Kiarostami had said he never shot a woman in an interior in none of his film, because he found it very unrealistic to see your mom and your sister inside the house without veil or sleeping without veil. And then in film, and especially Iranian cinema, I think one of the characteristic of it is like social realism cinema, the good films of Iran. And then you see this obvious unrealistic things and you don't question it. So when we were working, it was like an eye-opening moment, for me. I said, wow, how is that even possible for me, that I never think about the depth of it and how you can live in a parallel reality, basically.
I always find it fascinating when directors find creative ways around that. Like in Farhadi's A Separation, it's not that she's wearing a hijab for the movie. She's got a head injury. Or not Separation, sorry, it's Salesman.
Yeah.
Salesman. She's got a head injury, so she's got her head bandaged up, which is covering all her hair. So all of a sudden, you're skirting around that absurdity because, of course, she would still have her head bandaged inside the house. Like little clever things like that when directors find ways to hide the hair. It's really interesting.
Exactly, like Nasser Taqvai in Khajeh Bikhat. He managed to write the script somehow that the character of woman in the film either all the time is about to leave the house or she has just entered the house. So they justify the hijab on the scenes. But even the language they use, like I remember when we were watching Hamoon, or in one of Iranian film, there was like one swear word. I felt, wow, how close it is to how we speak, because other films have this very clean, pasteurized language that you never find in real life, And also that was when I was reading the script, I felt even I became a bit shy myself reading it. I said, wow, it's interesting, people talk the way I know they talk, they speak, they behave the way human behave. And
so you brought up the thing of censorship, and you also had mentioned earlier that there was a thought about filming this in Iran. So when did the change of plan come about with production to no longer shoot this in Iran and shoot it in Jordan, I believe? Was it in Jordan?
Yes, it was in Jordan.
And also, did Ali ever talk about how he was thinking about getting around shooting? Like if he was going to shoot that script in Iran, I'm sure it wouldn't have passed censors anyways. So what were those discussions like?
I think Ali didn't want to give a fake script to the authority, to get the permission, shoot something and then come out of Iran and shoot the rest of the scene, you know. I think he wanted to modify his script and shoot it, whatever he wants to shoot inside Iran. But I think the process of getting permission took them really, really long time, you know, and there was lots of obstacles that at the end they thought, okay, they're gonna shoot it somewhere else. First they aimed for Turkey. There was problem there, and eventually they decided to shoot in Jordan because it has this dryness of, you know, northeast of Iran, Khorasan, Mashhad. It has that had that, and it's early 2000, I think the story happens. So the face of the city and the location they had found, you know, had that to it, basically, you know.
Let me ask you a little bit about Sharifi, the character you played. That specific character wasn't based on anyone real, was it?
I do not think so, no.
I don't think so. I think it's an amalgamation of characters. So what was that experience like for you, getting inside the head of his character? What was that experience like as a director who previously is used to working behind the lens, now being an actor in front of the lens?
The script itself actually was a very good guide into the world of Sharifi for me. When I read the script, I could find parts that I could relate with that character. And overall, I could understand his behavior, his reaction to event and incidents. But during the table read, during the rehearsal time that I had with Ali, he helped me to understand the character's arc better, or Sharifi's turning point, basically. Sharifi is a local journalist who is in the middle of this case, but it's part of his job. It has become his job. He understands the dynamic of power within the city. He's under pressure by authority, what part and what information he can publish or not. But then when Mrs. Rahimi comes to the city, and especially Ali pointed that out, that especially after the killer is arrested and Sharifi goes with Mrs. Rahimi to interview and visit the victim's family, bit by bit he becomes more engaged with it, and also in another way he understands his situation better in that world. Also, there were a couple of more things that helped me during preparation. I spoke with a couple of journalists that actually were working back in Iran on that time. They told me about the details of their job. They told me about what local journalists have access to. They know people, they have shortcuts to information, and how they work with their colleagues from the capital, from Tehran. Also, one of my challenge basically was learning Mashhadi accent. That was very difficult for me and very stressful, but it helped me also to understand the character. I had a couple of months accent coach. Actually, she's in the film. She's the mother of Saeed Azimi, the killer, and she comes to the prison to say goodbye to her son. She's in that scene. Khanom Sima Sayed. Then later during the shoot, put on that shirt, trousers, the ring. That also helped me a lot throughout the filming.
How has that now impacted the way that you direct other actors? Like your experience working as an actor, working with Ali. Like I'm guessing that the way that you see the actor's world has probably shifted a little bit, right? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, actually, that's one of the main things that I take from this film, you know. It changed the way I'm looking at directing actors. And I guess lots of the actors that I work with misdirected them. What I understood is a director do whatever he or she can on the set, on the moment, you know, to get what he wants, basically. Ali, I think he trusted his actors, and he was directing me through other actors that was in front of me. Like, for example, he was sending in Zar one take to be, because I did the same to other actors that I was playing with, so I understood it. Zar was entering the scene in a very supportive way of Sharifi. So I react to what I was receiving. And then the next take, I expected the same, because I thought, okay, people are looking for this exact feeling, exact moment. But the next take, Khanum Rahimi was coming very intimidating, you know, putting pressure on me. So on the moment, my reaction was very fresh, different from previous take, and spontaneous.
So when he was giving notes to Zara, was he giving them to her privately? So then you didn't know that.
Yes.
Okay. So he was never just like yelling out the note to everybody in the room.
So every time, no, very discreet. Always there was something to discover on the moment of, you know, the dialogue was exchanged. And for me, it was like playground. I mean, because of this hiding and giving one information to me or to other actors, it was always surprise. It was always fresh. Every take that we enter.
Because you don't know how they're going to do it each time.
Exactly.
That's cool.
It also seems a lot like the standard like neorealism approach, cinema verite approach that, you know, we in our Kiarostami for Where's the Friend's House, in the Kiarostami episode, we talked about how to get the little boy to cry in the opening scene, he off camera ripped a Polaroid picture of him he had to actually inflict the real emotion of him, but then has the teacher dub the lines later on saying, how many times did I tell you to bring in your homework? So it just seems like what Ali Abbasi is doing is sort of another, you know, an evolution of that tactic. Is like he's using what old school Iranian tactics would do of neorealism to inflict real emotion out of you by almost catching you off guard by not asking for the same thing on different takes. And it worked because I think you do a wonderful job playing the character. Your performance is really stunning. And the fact that you previous to this had close to no experience acting says a lot about you and also a lot about Ali Abbasi's approach to making the film, because you guys, it's just an incredible movie and you do a wonderful job.
I think also this technique works when there are two actors or more than two people in the scene, you know.
Yeah,
I'm sure it was different from how he worked with Mehdi Bajestani, how he worked with Zara Amir Ebrahimi, because they all had scene alone, you know. But with me, because I always had someone to play with, you know, I was always reacting to someone or something. It worked perfectly on those scenes.
Do you think that there's ever a line in terms of when it's appropriate and when it's inappropriate? Like, for example, that scene in Where's the Friend's House, when he rips the boy's photo and to make him cry. Like, I was telling Kava, I was like, I think that's too much. Like, I think you've crossed the line there. I think that this is like, that's not appropriate. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't have to do that. I think if that's what you have to do to get somebody to cry, yeah, I think you're being lazy. But I think the way that you described it, I don't think that there's a harm in that. The way that you're describing it, like you said, it feels more like a playground, like an actor's playground, like you get to discover new things. Do you think that there is a line, or do you think that it's like, hey, whatever, if you need to like traumatize a child to make him cry, then do it?
It's a
like,
big debate. It's been always big debates, especially with non-professional actors, that they have less say. I mean, they don't have lawyers and
right.
like a big contracts to defend them, you know. It's been in Iranian cinema, it's always been a topic, like what's the line, you know. I don't find it also in Kiarostami very harmful, I mean, because it wasn't traumatizing the kid, but I think as much as you don't really harm them, you can do these things to get the best moment out of them.
Right. Okay.
Did Ali Abbasi rip up a photo of you in front of you to get you to start in that scene with when you're in that scene with Mehdi in the prison cell? Did he take a photo of you to just make you traumatized for that scene? So that you're looking at the serial killer?
2 times. No,
Yeah.
he didn't do that.
He's burning his hard drives off camera.
Yeah, he's burning your hard
laptop.
Yeah, that would get you to cry. Yeah, smashing your laptop. Why don't you talk a little bit about your experience with working with Zara in scenes, since you had a lot of scenes with her?
First of all, it was, I don't know, good point or bad point. I didn't have that much question about the background of Sharifi. You know, I told you it was more instinctive approach and relationship to the character. But I was watching Zar like digging into character every day. You know, every day she had lots of questions to the set, and it was very interesting. She was like reading a journalist book, you know, about other serial killers and how they approach it. That was something that was very interesting for me. The second thing, that whatever they were thrown at them, they could use it, bring it into their acting, you know. For me, a slight change would have disoriented me and said, oh, what happened? Should we say this or shouldn't we say, oh, what is this guy passing by all of a sudden now? Like, he's like Ali said, walk here to there, but that's blocked there. So part of it was Ali putting like surprise things on our way, but it was a lesson for me how Zar and few scenes that I watch from Mehdi, whatever comes from their way, whatever is obstacle, you know, they take it and bring it into the character and the moment that they are playing.
They're able to incorporate
it. Exactly. Those two things, and
that's really cool.
And digging into character, to background, what has happened to her, you know, her motivations, all of it for every scene. Those two were the most important thing I think I learned from, and the fact that they were like, most of the actors, I mean, had radio background, theater background. Zar was a TV star back in Iran, and she had, I don't know, I think some films before joining Holy Spider, but they never intimidated me, or they never gave me that feeling that, you know, it's my first time. They, at least the people who work with me, they created very safe environment, you know, for me to be there, you know, and go on with them in hope of, you know, creating something.
So what's next for you then? Are you going to continue this path of an actor and maybe make a sequel to Holy Spider, Holy Spider 2? Or are you going to continue working at, like, I know you're currently in development on your first feature. What's the next chapter for Arash?
I'm gonna focus on making my first feature, that's for sure. But I really enjoyed the experience that I had. I won't initiate it, but I will continue. I'm open to continue, you know, to try. I'm gonna focus on my first feature film and to use the things that I learned from Holy Spider in terms of directing point of view and directing actors.
Very cool.
That's awesome.
You should be very proud of your work in Holy Spider. You're a very good actor.
Thank you.
As a director, Arash Ashtiani has films that you can see online. The Tunnel was recently a Vimeo staff picks, right?
Yes.
The short, The Tunnel, which you are now adapting into a feature.
Exactly.
Only Sound Remains, which was the short that you worked at the London Film School, was a BAFTA-nominated short.
Yes, exactly.
Can that be seen online, or is that?
I think it's on YouTube.
It's on YouTube.
Yes.
And I'm very much looking forward to seeing the development of The Tunnel, because I think you're a prolific director, very good writer, and surprisingly a great actor too, which you just keep impressing me with every turn.
Thanks.
So thank you.
Thanks, and
thank you for sharing your talent
you
to all of
us. You
us.
Guys, same. I know Kaveh. I've worked with him. He has rewrite my script. I always, whatever I write, I send it to him and get feedbacks. Very, very, very important and useful feedbacks. So. And I'm really happy to meet you, Farhan.
Oh, I'm happy to meet you too. It's my pleasure.
Thank you, Arash. Thank you, Farhan. This has been Cinema Rex Podcast. We'll see you next week. Music for Cinema Rex was written and performed by Sohail Sadinejad.